This is the final program in the current series, Sir David Simmons, His Life in Focus. Sir David.
After Prime Minister Arthur announced that he intended to ask the Governor General to appoint me as CJ, there were some issues raised in the press and on the calling programs and so on. And the criticisms were rooted in an assumption that because I had been a politician and Attorney General, I would be unable as Chief Justice to be impartial, which is the essential quality of a judge. Quite a number of people wrote letters to the press, including Gordon Matthews and I think Frank De Silva and others. I used to smile when these letters appeared because you see that assumption, not based in fact, that assumption ignored an important fact which was a facet of my personality and character. And it was that in 1981, in March 1981, about 3 months before the general election, I had demonstrated to Barbadians my independence and my ability to put principle before party when I was chairman of CBC. The minister responsible for CBC at the time was Nigel Barra, old lodge boy. But he had, I'd want to say a harebrained idea about separating the accounts as between radio and television at CBC and making one buy from the other. So when he asked us to look at this idea that he had, as chairman, I established a committee to analyze the implications of what the minister wanted. And after a few months, we had arrived at a conclusion that to pursue his idea would destroy the finances of CBC. And funnily enough, in that year, 1980-81, CBC was poised for the first time in many years to make an operating profit. And we were able to show him that if you force us to do this, that'll be wiped out. He refused to accept our position and asked, why is the board fighting me? And I said to him, we're not fighting you. We are putting before you all the facts. You know, it was a high-powered board, you know. People like Rudy Gibbons from Baima, there was a Brewster, not Vic. This was one who had been a well-known high jumper at Harrison College. But he used to work at Cable and Wireless and other members. Tony Best was the general manager. And these people worked beyond the call and produced the figures to show that this thing can't work. Now, what was my position? As chairman, I owed fiduciary duties to CBC, not to the minister, not to the Barbados Labour Party. And I appealed to a number of persons to speak to the minister and tell him, pull back from this foolishness. He wouldn't hear. And it came to a head one Monday evening when I asked the Prime Minister, Tom Adams, to bring Barrow to a meeting of the parliamentary party at 111 Roebuck Street. I wanted him to tell all of our colleagues in the parliamentary party about the matter. I'll put my case. He was summoned and he refused to come. And after 45 minutes, I stormed out of the place, came home, and wrote my resignation because as a matter of principle, I was not taking dictation from a minister when I knew that that dictation spelled financial ruin for the corporation that I was chairman of. But nobody in 2001 adverted to that or thought that I had shown a streak of character that might serve me in good stead. So they talked and I went down. But what it meant was that I had to be very careful when I assumed the office of Chief Justice, because there would have been all those people waiting for me to do foolishness. And of course it would put an unusual strain on common sense if they believe that I wasn't aware of what I had to do. And so I was very careful. I did what I had to do. And I do not believe that there's any person in Barbados who could say that I did not perform my duties and responsibilities as Chief Justice fairly and impartially. You know, that stance that I took in 1981 may have contributed 3 months later to the fact that I lost St. Philip North by 171 votes, 143 votes or something like that. But it didn't matter. That didn't matter. What was important is that I stood for principle. But you know, life is funny. After the 8 years that I served as Chief Justice, when Thompson refused to extend me for the 2 years, having encouraged me to apply to him for the extension, some of the same critics who wrote to the press were at least men enough to write in the press again and say, Mr. Thompson, you're wrong. Rethink your decision. We need to have Simmons down there. Words to that effect. You see him? Frank De Silva and Gordon Matthews and so, you know.
For his distinguished career, Sir David was awarded on a number of occasions. In fact, he was one of the few Barbadians to be awarded 2 honorary degrees.
You don't know who nominates you or anything. I don't know. I got a letter from the registrar of the university in Jamaica. I think his name is Mr. Aiton. Telling me that the Senate of the university had determined that they would give me this honorary doctorate, Doctor of Laws. And, well, they wanted like CVs and this, that, and the other. And arrangements were made for somebody to come, the public orator, to come and talk to me and get a little background for the oration that was to be done on the day. That was the second one. The first one was LSE, my old school, in 2003. They sent and told me that they were aware that I had become Chief Justice, and they had heard that I had had a distinguished career in the law and all that, you know, the usual platitudinous things. And they wanted to make me and Kofi Annan and somebody else in the, I think, November or whatever. But you don't reject those things. I accepted with, you know, with gratitude, and humility.
In 2001, for his contribution to public service, law and politics, Sir David was awarded Barbados's Centennial Honour, and what was at that time the island's highest honour, the Knight of St. Andrew.
Your Excellency, David Anthony Cathcart Simmons, for the presentation of the Order of Knight of St. Andrew.
In programme number 2, Sir David spoke of his memorable days in the West Indian Student Centre and how they were all watered and fed by the hands of Miss Prescott.
First of all, you had a good meal. 3-course West Indian meal, cooked by a Bajan, Miss Prescott.
Miss Prescott is alive and well and will be celebrating her 99th birthday in January 2022.
I remember David Simmons. I think it was a brother he had too. Well, you know, my job was cooking. Well, I was sure that the West Indian students, especially them from Barbados, that guy come in for the dinner. The dinner, the hungry men that come in, you know. So I used to try my best to do what I can for them, you know. Peas and rice, split pea soup, all sorts of rice, and I used to cook the soup too, and all sorts of things for them. Things that, like, just how I would cook at home in Barbados is how I used to cook for them, you know. So they always used to be happy, you know. We had no problem.
Sir David is delighted to learn that Miss Prescott, who fed him in the early 1960s during his days in London, is alive and well. On that note, and in a very reflective mood, and with a grateful heart, Sir David wraps up this series.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for engaging me in this reflection on my life. I can only say that I've had a long, interesting, and very fulfilling life so far. 70 plus 10 plus 11. I can't ask for more. So, I must first give thanks to the Almighty who has preserved me for this length of time and has sustained me to do all that I've tried to do in my life. Number of people, of course, that I have to thank, and I think particularly of my parents, about whom I reflected in one of the earlier programs, but more especially my siblings. There were 5 of us. 2 have died within the last 7 years. So there are 3 of us left. But growing up, we were very, very close. Since there were 4 boys, that enabled us to feel the top order of a cricket team. We played a lot of cricket with not only the boys at Dodge, but I had, for example, good friends in Padmore Village, which was right next door, who would come down and play. Hensley Robinson, who had an excellent career as Chief Electoral Officer. And of course, I wouldn't say he succeeded my father, but after my father retired, there was Garvey Allen, who succeeded him at Dodds, and then Hensley. So that was fortuitous that one from so close to Dodds, who shared a lot of time with us as boys, should ultimately come to head that institution. At Lodge School, I was lucky to have been appointed head boy, and I got maximum support from all the other prefects and the boys in the school and the teachers during my year. I, of course, didn't win a Barbados scholarship, but all that I achieved in my university career was entirely down to the sacrifice that my father and mother made to support me as a student in England in the 60s, between 60 and 65 when I got the master's. And after that I went lecturing and I was able to support myself. But I know that my parents sacrificed a lot for me, and I am entirely grateful to them for that sacrifice that enabled me to get a career. As you know, we've looked at aspects of the career, and I spoke about my involvement in music in London and how it helped me to, as it were, add some additional funds, add some funds to my monthly allowance. And you know, I could not have done that were it not for the fact that my mother, who was a pianist, and her brother was one of the outstanding pianists of Barbados, Kid Branker. But she was insistent as a young boy that I should go and study music. And she sent me down the road to Mr. Pearson Scott, father of my good friend Nancy Scott. And Mr. Scott taught me the rudiments of the piano. But I realized sometime after probably 3 years, I couldn't walk around with a piano. It was easier to walk around with a trumpet. And so all I wanted to know was, on the trumpet, which valves represented C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and so on the scale. And once I knew them, I got a little tuition from Mr. Norman Seeley, who was one of the instructors at Dodds, father of our ambassador, Trevor Clark, former ambassador, and of course, the very excellent superintendent of police, John Seeley. John's father used to work at Dodds. And he taught me, because you see, before that, there was a band at Dodds, you know, before we went there in 1948. Oh yeah. Where do you think Ernie Small learned to play the trumpet? Up there. Anyhow, that opportunity to learn the rudiments of music helped me then transition to the trumpet, and I even changed band in London and so on. I got another good friend in those days who I must not forget, you know, Mike Williams. Mike, the advertising agent who used to work with Castani and Williams and did a lot of work for C.O. Williams Construction Company. Mike was a good friend. He lived at Dodds for a period of time, a few years, when his uncle, Lieutenant Colonel O.F.C. Walker, he was also Frank Walker, O.F.C. Walker, was in charge of Dodge for a few years before my father took over. And Mike and I have this great love for music and jazz and so on. Well, having gone to England and met so many West Indian students, it was natural that I should find myself involved with one of the females who was around at the student center at the time, Marie. And Marie has been the rock on which this marriage has survived for 55 years. And a tremendous support over the years, emotional support, and a facility that I treasure greatly. That ability to understand people. I am very trusting, and here I've met a lot of people I just take at face value. But she has this knack, a gift of looking through, looking behind, and telling me, be careful of so-and-so, or so-and-so is whatever. And she is always right. And I'm often reluctant to admit that she's right, but she's right. Very few times she has, assessed somebody and been proven wrong. That is a great help, because especially in politics, you have to have a very discerning eye. Now, of course, she could not be involved in politics because the whole of her legal career was in the legal service of Barbados, deputy registrar, magistrate, registrar, judge, and so on. So she stayed away from it. You would never see her in a crowd. She was very, very careful, because we didn't wish her name bandied about on any platform. And so she was a quiet measure of support throughout my long political career. And the children, the same, Gavin and Lynn Marie, they have been a tower of strength. They too have given me a lot of emotional support. Politics in Barbados is so highly personalized, and there are so many demands on your time as a politician that you end up not devoting as much time as you ought to your family, and particularly your children. And the society can also be very brutal. And whereas those of us in politics can perhaps develop the kind of skin, kind of hide that would allow you to receive slings and arrows and just pass them off. Some of the things that are said to children of politicians cut deep and remain with them. And if you're not careful, it could twist their personalities. Now, of course, since I've retired, I've had the opportunity to give a lot of support, particularly to Lynn Marie, who is in the law, and I enjoy that. And we have serious intellectual battles from time to time, because she's not easy, but it's all in good humor. And the law is not straightforward. There are usually two opinions. That's why you have a plaintiff and a defendant, two different sides advancing or mounting two different arguments. So when we have it out, that's how we see it. Fortunately, I'd say we are all very fond of each other, and the relationships are good. And I'm happy and thankful for that, and treasure the kind of relationship that I have with my family, that I've always had with all sections of my family. I could not have made a contribution in politics without the support of the constituents, first of St. Philip North, and then of St. Thomas. And there's so many people, and I won't wish to recite a list, but it would be remiss of me if I did not mention at least two who stayed with me through thick and thin. Harry Blades in St. Philip North, a loyal and trusted supporter who would always let me know what was happening in the constituency. Even when I was living here at Niels and he was living in St. Philip, he would still call and tell me, so-and-so has died, you have to go to the funeral, whatever. Harry is a wonderful fella. And in St. Thomas, Caswell gave a lot of help, as I mentioned in one of the episodes when we were canvassing. And Caswell, of course, his personal assistant, rendered yeoman service. He was very methodical. And, things like sending letters to ministries for improved bus service or water service or lights or whatever. Caswell would do that and follow it up so that we could go to a branch meeting and read the letter that we sent on behalf of the people, let us say, in Bloomsbury or Dunscombe or whatever. He kept a good filing system. But Cynthia Ford, the best, the very best. I met Cynthia in 1985 during the nomination for the by-election. And Cynthia had that constituency group for St. Thomas organized like a well-oiled machine and kept it in that fashion until I left, and I believe she's improved on it since I've left. There are some politicians who poo-poo the idea of a constituency group. You cannot win without a constituency group behind you and supporting you. And politics is about winning friends, not making enemies. You must therefore have a proper relationship with the members of that constituency group and indeed the wider constituency. And so when I went to St. Thomas, I found a group that was well organized, managed by Cynthia as the president, and it used to support Tom. And we built on it, and we did a number of other things too, because, things are continuum, so I brought my little touches to it and so on. But I would say this. As a minister, you have to manage your time, because you've got national responsibilities and you've got local constituency responsibilities. And that's where Cynthia and Caswell were particularly helpful. For as much as I had 27 departments, 27 as Attorney General and Minister of Home Affairs, I ensured that every Wednesday evening from about 5 o'clock until 8, I was in that constituency office in Rock Hall, meeting constituents, dealing with their problems. And if I was going to be, even before I got, but if I was going to be a little bit late, Cynthia would be there to interview people and deal with them before I got there. And she would not leave until after I left. That was loyalty. That was loyalty. That was commitment and dedication. And I thank Cynthia 100% for all she did for me. Because in addition to ensuring that I was there every Wednesday, and the second Sunday of each month, the constituency branch now met, and we moved it around, you know, Holy Innocents, Welches, wherever, so that you carried the constituency branch of Sharon to the people rather than ask them to trek from awkward places where they couldn't get a bus to come somewhere else. So I have to thank those who helped to raise me up to a level of satisfactory political performance. I've been asked if I would do it all over again. And upon reflection, I'd say yes, but with, of course, the benefit of hindsight. I would tweak certain aspects of my career. The thing about political life or being a politician is that you can affect for the better so many persons. I put water in 40 acre. All those people in that village benefited. Put the road in Hopewell, so on. Or you bring legislation of a national character, which affects so many people, hundreds, perhaps in some cases thousands. On the other hand, as a lawyer, I saw myself perhaps in a different light from many people, but I saw myself as rendering a social service, helping on the criminal side people who could not defend themselves, helping them to defend themselves. But on the civil side, when I used to do a lot of family law, I gave up that in 1987, but when I used to do that, you were always adjusting relationships, and that is how you could help. But I would be helping a husband against a wife or vice versa, and the interests of the children would be paramount. But just a small group. If you were dealing with accident cases and contracts and torts and so on, that's between parties, a couple of people, two people very often, but seldom more than, you seldom had a large number. Except that I sued the then government, the LP government, the Sanitation Service Authority, for not managing Mount Stinkeroo properly and causing a nuisance to the people in Archall and Bennett's. That again was a political thing, but I was doing a legal case to ensure that those people got damages. They got substantial damages, those households. So that's what I can say about the difference between the two, and I was able to marry them for the better part of 25 years. But you get as I say, so much more satisfaction from the political experience because of the impact that something that you do positively has on people's lives and existence. Before I finish this reflection and thoughts, I was lucky to have 2 secretaries during my career from 1970 when I started my private practice to 2010 when I demitted office as Chief Justice. For 24 years, Grace Wise was my secretary, and without her I would have been at sea. And then during my ministerial career and my judicial career, I had the most wonderful executive secretary, a superb person, June Christian. And they helped to keep me organized and keep my diary so I didn't forget meetings or appointments. And I shall forever be grateful to them. I said that June is the best I have ever come across in the public service. And I sincerely mean that. And I repeat it publicly because she has been a shining example of the highest competence and integrity. And I value her friendship greatly.
And we thank Sir David and Lady Simmons for making this series possible. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Every blessing.